The world starts to move on, even as President Trump refuses to do so. The immigrant power couple behind the greatest medical breakthrough of our lifetimes. And Apple just gave us a peek at the future of the PC. Here's what you need to know. Good Wednesday morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Veterans Day, November 11th. I am Carlo Versano, and I'm here with the big man, Baker McAdoo Machado, filling in for Jill today. Jill is off hanging out with her daughter who's out of school today. So, Baker, good day to you. How are you, man? I actually haven't talked to you since the election.
I know, Carlo. Great to see you. I'm so excited to do this with you today. Yeah, much different scenario than the election where you were looking like Steve Kornacki that night with your tie and your rolled up sleeves. Like, never seen either of us, by the way, look so professional on one night in my life. So
you were looking good too. You had the tie, the little pocket square.
People were very confused. People were very confused by that. They're not accustomed to me ever dressing like that. I'm sure the same for you as well.
It was pretty funny. But yeah, so we're a week out. And what's happening? Do we have a president-elect?
Oh, yes. That is a great question, Carlo, on this Veterans Day. Yeah, let's start with the presidential transition, or really the lack thereof of the transition. Now, a week after Election Day, the New York Times, interestingly, Carlo, reached out to election officials in every single state in the United States, and not a single one, not one, reported any voting irregularities that would have affected the outcome of their counts. Nevertheless, though, the Trump administration continues to insist that the president did not lose. This even as world leaders, with, of course, the notable exceptions of Vladimir Putin of Russia and Xi Jinping of China, have called to congratulate President-elect Biden. Now, the Biden transition team has not been given any access to any resources that are required, Carlo, by law, though Biden said the transition process is still moving forward. He called President Trump's refusal to concede a, quote, embarrassment. Now, interesting note out there, Carlo, we're getting more numbers, obviously, as they continue to count a lot of the votes. I still think they're only 80% of the way counting the votes here in New York State, but that's another story. Biden's popular vote margin just hit 50.8, and that is significant for a myriad of different reasons. One of them is the fact that now eclipses Ronald Reagan's 1980 margin. That's kind of viewed as almost the blowout gold standard, that number. Right. Joe Biden has now received the highest share of the popular vote for any challenger since FDR in 1932. Again, the numbers continue to go up, Carlo. We're even expecting the total number to be about 155 to 160 million people who actually voted on Election Day.
You know, it's funny because the narrative out there is still, at least it seems to be, that this race was like super close. Mm-hmm. And it was close in these handful of swing states. So I guess there's some truth to it. But in totality, it really wasn't that close. Right. And the red mirage happened exactly as we were told it was going to. Right? Florida comes in for Trump early. Some of these other states look like they're going for Trump. And then once they count the mail-in ballots, they go blue.
And vice versa for Biden, too.
Yeah. So that narrative that is still a little interesting, that is kind of how people are viewing this, that Trump sort of just lost by a hair. But, you know, the stuff with the transition, I mean, am I living on Earth?
No. This is also weird.
What is happening? Is this just a massive troll job from the Trump administration meant to enrage everyone else? Or is there something more to it? I mean, I think it's the former. I don't think that they actually even think that they're going to install President Trump for a second term. This isn't, like you said, right? This isn't 2000 in Florida where the margin was like a couple hundred votes and they got the Supreme Court to come in.
Yeah, 500.
Right. They would need to invalidate the results of like 3 states. And I don't think that can happen. But
no.
I mean,
and those are tens of thousands of votes in each one of those states. I mean, we're talking 40,000 votes in Pennsylvania, like 30,000 votes in Arizona.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying. I'm not. I'm really trying not to get worked up about this because it's just not good for anybody. But, I don't think that they're actually trying to overturn the results. I think that they're
No.
backing up Trump, and as he's trying to seed this doubt about the process, so that he can claim it was stolen for the rest of his life, and whatever he decides to do next, whether that's some sort of political super PAC, whether that's some sort of media empire, or whether that's just playing golf at Mar-a-Lago and tweeting through it for the rest of time. That's that. So I think that that's what this is about. But the long-term damage that that's doing to our electoral process is really going to be significant.
Carlo, President Trump obviously going through the varying stages of emotions right now. I think we might be in the anger or the grief stage at this particular point, which is as to why he has not cooperated any of his administration officials in the transition for Joe Biden. I've seen old Obama officials who have tweeted saying that the 70 days that Joe Biden has until Election Day right now are incredibly crucial because that's when the State Department should be giving them information about the transition process. This is when Joe Biden should be getting the daily presidential briefings, all of those other sorts of things that are very important for him. Now, he has said that he plans to use any sort of legal procedures that he can possible to make the Trump administration cooperate. But as to why President Trump is not cooperating and why we're also seeing Republicans continue to back him, Carlo, I think it has to do with Georgia. You saw Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, the two senators that are in that runoff, the Republicans, essentially write a letter asking the Republican Secretary of State to resign because they didn't like the job that Georgia did with their election, clearly because it went to Joe Biden. And then you saw all the Republican state legislators also write a letter essentially criticizing the Secretary of State. They're doing this because clearly they want President Trump's base and President Trump to continue to stay fired up for that January 5th runoff because that's the Senate majority right there, Carlo. Whoever wins those two seats controls essentially the future of Supreme Court justices, Joe Biden's, what he wants to do with his policies, all of that. So I think Republicans want to keep everybody, Republicans, motivated for that January 5th runoff. But Carlo, President Trump can't stretch it out till January 5th. The Electoral College processes the votes and certifies a winner in the next week or so. President Trump can't keep this going until January.
Well, the other thing, first of all, I think I said this yesterday with Jill, it doesn't even really make sense when you think about it because the whole argument is basically that Trump is still the president, but the argument to motivate the base in Georgia would be to keep the Senate a check on President Biden, but they're saying that President Trump is still the president. Right. So look, I mean, this is why I have, not to mention, by the way, the fact that the Trump's base didn't even deliver Georgia for him. He actually lost in Georgia.
Right.
For
and
the
the
first
tally
time
keeps
since
going up for Biden there too.
Yeah, so I don't know how important his base is in that state. But look, this is why I have a problem with when people say, like, and we have a lot of listeners, and I respect them and I love them. But they, they'll write in and
like
they say, look,
kids.
Yes, exactly. They'll say things like, I hate Trump. I think he's unfit for office, but I vote for him because I like his policies on taxes or whatever. It's a package deal, guys. Like, he may have the world's greatest economic policy. He may be able to cure cancer, with a touch, but that comes with the erosion in these democratic institutions that is going to affect us for a generation or longer, and it's going to affect our children, frankly. So, I mean, I think what's happening here, what's scary about this is it seems like this is the playbook that the Republicans would be rolling out if this were a close race, if this were actually what was going to happen, if it came down to a state like Florida. So just because it can't work because Biden beat him so soundly across 3 or 4 states doesn't exactly instill confidence to me. So I don't know. Baker, one other thing, and I will get off. I'll get off my soapbox about this. It's just really annoying me this morning. The other thing that just really annoys me about this, for all the talk about hacking and disinformation and these major postal delays and overwhelmed election officials, this election was shockingly smooth, all things considered. It basically went off without a hitch in the middle of a pandemic.
So true.
And there are thousands of regular Americans, election officials, poll workers, regular old civil servants who work their butts off to make that happen. And the president and his enablers are basically telling them to, piss off.
Carlo, on top of all of that, there's been polls out there asking Americans how they felt the voting process went. And I think of almost close to 60% of Americans said it was either very smooth or very smooth for them in terms of the process of voting this year. So to your point, exactly, I think more people voted by mail for the first time, which alleviated a lot of the crowds and the systems that a lot of people have on regular election day. And I think for most people, it was a pleasant experience so far this voting day, and that proves with the amount of people that ended up voting this year, which broke records.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the other big story that happened out of Washington yesterday. The Supreme Court took up arguments in the Trump administration's challenge to the Affordable Care Act. And judging by how the justices spoke yesterday, Carlo, it seems like they're leaning against dismissing the law outright. So obviously big news for supporters of Obamacare. Justices John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh suggested that striking down or severing the individual mandate would not automatically invalidate the rest of the ACA as a result. Now, the individual mandate already is effectively meaningless after Congress zeroed out that tax penalty, so severing it from the broader law wouldn't change very much. Now, John Roberts and Kavanaugh apparently on board with those 3 liberal justices, so if that stands as it is, there's your 5 justices right there to keep Obamacare and making it see the light of day. I do have to say, Carlo, as I listened to the hearing yesterday, Brett Kavanaugh, if anything, doubled down on essentially sticking with precedent on the Affordable Care Act, essentially saying if you invalidate the individual mandate, you want to leave the entire law in place, because what do you do with the 20 million people or so that are on Obamacare that have pre-existing conditions? It's not the he basically made the argument, and John Roberts did the same. It's not the Supreme Court's job to create this law when clearly it's Congress's job to figure this all out. Now, this also was our first introduction to Amy Coney Barrett also, which was pretty impressive because while she didn't tip her hand on how she potentially might rule, she did ask some pretty interesting questions. And I actually have to admit, Carlo, I was surprised by her questioning. She seemed like at this point, she doesn't seem like she's a reliable conservative vote on this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if she does vote to invalidate it. But I was surprised by her.
Interesting. I didn't really get a chance to listen to any of the arguments yesterday, so it's good to hear that from you. I was shocked that Kavanaugh appeared to back up Roberts on this. The argument, I mean, the actual legal argument here, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but to a layman, it just seems incredibly stupid. Like, I don't even know really how it got to the Supreme Court, other than the fact that every federal judge on the bench is effectively now like a GOP political operative. Yeah, I mean, they're arguing that the individual mandate is a tax, even though they made it zero back in 2017 as the first order of business when Republicans took back Congress. So I've never really understood that to begin with, how it could be a tax but also have no value. I don't want to get into a big Obamacare thing, but I'll just say never forget how badly the Democrats mismanaged the messaging and the rollout of Obamacare 10 years ago. It was really the perfect. I'm being a little salty today,
you are. I like this.
Please forgive me, but I mean, it was the perfect landmark legislation for the Obama era. It was too weak to achieve anything real, but sort of perfectly crafted to just kind of piss everybody off without actually creating major change. So just wasting a bunch of hard-won political capital that then they immediately lost in those midterms.
So Carlo, as somebody who really pays attention to the court and how things are going to be looked at for the next term, this was also an important one because obviously in a 6-3 majority conservative court, the outlooks and the rulings are going to come out much differently, to the point now Brett Kavanaugh, which is so weird to say, Brett Kavanaugh is your new swing justice now in this Supreme Court. So anything really Brett Kavanaugh says in these hearings are really going to be taken exponentially higher than the other judges, because that's essentially might be where the ruling's at. This is now going to force John Roberts essentially more to the left, which you know he doesn't want to do, to side with those 3 other justices. And I have to admit, Brett Kavanaugh essentially saying that he is going to keep this up, apparently keep the Affordable Care Act going, was important to me because President Trump has made this a hallmark to get rid of. And President Trump has put a lot of pressure on his judges that he has put on the Supreme Court to get rid of this law. So if one of President Trump's judges, and by the way, again, I don't know how Amy Coney Barrett or even Neil Gorsuch plan to rule either, but at least if one of President Trump's judges upholds this law, he's going to be much more angry than just at John Roberts.
Yeah, and I mean, the bottom line here, I guess, if you're not super interested in following every machination, or maybe you don't have the time like we do to follow every machination of the Supreme Court. Bottom line, it seems as though Obamacare will stand even without the individual mandate.
All right, let's talk about the pandemic, Carlo. Another reminder that even with the good vaccine news that we got this week, we are still far, far, far from being out of the woods. COVID hospitalizations here in the U.S. have now hit 62,000. That set the peak back in April that we had. This is the country is now recording more than 100,000 new cases every day, with ICUs in states like Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Texas already strained. Officials are warning that the situation is likely to get even worse in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, here in New York City, the daily positivity rate is fast approaching that 3% threshold, at which schools then have to go all remote then. Meanwhile, the CDC warning Americans that Thanksgiving gatherings could be the next big super spreader event, and they're recommending that dinner be held outside if possible. And I don't know if you've seen these positivity rates in some of these other hot states right now, Carlo. In South Dakota in particular, I think they have, I think almost over 50% of cases right now are turning out to be positive, and that is in one of the most rural areas that you can possibly get.
I believe Wisconsin has a rate approaching that level too. It's really incredible. There was a study in this journal Nature about how restaurants, gyms, and these other indoor venues accounted for 8 in 10 new cases of coronavirus back in the early days in the spring. Just another reminder about what is and isn't a risk, right? You know, the indoor event, I know we say it a billion times this year, but like it's these indoor events in places that are poorly ventilated. That's where you're getting it. You're not getting it from, and I say this, you know, acknowledging that of course you can, but you're not getting it from walking down the street with a mask on and somebody passes you.
Your chances are much lower,
much lower, exactly. Also, I did want to mention this. There's a great profile in the New York Times today. It's actually, this profile has been done in a couple newspapers around the world today about this Turkish power couple behind Pfizer's vaccine partner, this German biotech company called BioNTech. They are effectively the parents of this mRNA technology that is behind this vaccine. That's probably they're going to end up winning the Nobel Peace Prize next year.
Totally, especially with the amount of people that might be saved by this.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great piece just about how they they sort of came to be these behind the scenes heroes and all this in the vaccine race. Just one other thing on COVID I wanted to mention: the Johns Hopkins numbers today say that we hit 200,000 cases yesterday. Just be a little bit wary of those. Those numbers can be misleading because they often take into account delayed data from over the weekend. We will hit 200,000 cases soon. Daily cases, that is, but the best thing to do is just always look at the 7-day average, not a single day. That gives you a better sense of where things are.
And regarding the holidays, Carlo, Anthony Fauci, got a lot of attention a few weeks ago when he said that he basically didn't have to he was not planning to have his kids come over for the holidays. They all live in apparently different states, and my mom, who I've not seen in a year because of COVID in Colorado, she was like, am I not going to see you for the holidays as a result? And based off of this stuff from the CDC and the uptick in cases that we're having now, all
Are you
of a sudden
not go?
now I'm like, Mom, I don't even know if I'm coming to Colorado for the holidays, which is such a weird conversation to have, with your family.
It breaks my heart, man.
Yeah.
Really,
but like, if that's me, that's I'm sure so many other families out there.
Yeah, and then Christmas and Hanukkah coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, God, it's gonna be rough.
All the more reason to get this dumpster fire of a year 2020 over with. Carlo, let's move on to the tech beat. Some better news. Apple announcing their first computers that are powered by their own in-house processors. That is a huge milestone for the company that could change how PCs and laptops look and work in the future. Now, you might remember Apple cut ties with Intel, and they decided to build their own chips from scratch, making them more like the chips found in their iPhones than a full-scale computer. Now, it's important to note, Carlo, I think Apple represents less than 10% of the computer market. So obviously them not doing this partnership with Intel anymore on a micro level is obviously not as big because, again, 10% is not as large. But again, if you have more companies like Apple essentially doing everything in-house, these chip makers are going to be in a lot of trouble. And by the way, if there's any concerns about, anti-regulatory frameworks down the road, Apple is going to be super on the list down the road because if they're making essentially everything on their own iPhones, that's going to hurt competition across the board.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting point. I mean, I think that from a consumer standpoint, the reason why this is important, Apple says these M1 chips, which is what they're called, are more powerful and more efficient than the regular silicon processors, which could translate to smaller designs and longer battery life for laptops and desktop tower computers. So that could be a game changer. I have to say, though, I don't understand why Apple can't make all of these announcements at once. Like I believe, this is the third Apple event this fall that we're reporting on.
Yeah.
I'm an Apple user, and even I'm like, this is a bit much, guys.
Oh, yeah, they're turning into like a Groupon email. It's like, okay, I get it. Stop sending me more stuff. By the way, I don't even, that joke seems so old. I don't even know if anybody still uses Groupon.
No, the better version of that joke now is, I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever there's a presidential race, I put myself on the email list of both candidates.
Oh, yeah.
And it is, I don't know why I do it to myself.
I was going to say, you probably
get
Trump fundraising emails. You've been getting like a ton of them right now.
Well, I now have them going to a folder, so I don't even look anymore. But I think something along the lines of 40 or 50 a day. It's unbelievable.
I saw somebody on Twitter, because President Trump is looking for money for his legal defense fund. Somebody had said that he sent 14 emails in a span of just a couple hours the other day, which was really crazy.
By the way, the Democrats do it too. I mean, Trump, but it is. I just can't imagine someone's like, well, I didn't click on the first 15 emails.
But this
from
one
the,
is
Trump
number 13 is going to do it. Number 13 is going to get me. Finally, Carlo, Peloton has inked a multi-year deal with none other Queen Beyoncé to produce exclusive content for their at-home workout classes. Peloton says Beyoncé is the most requested artist by Peloton members, and she'll create a series of themed workout experiences across fitness categories. I think these partnerships are brilliant for Peloton because, Spotify and all these other places already do this with artists. Why not Peloton? Peloton already has like 80s themed, bike classes, or you have like a pop themed like workout class. Why not have an entire thing curated by these artists and a partnership with them to get more people to want to do Peloton, which has been thriving during this pandemic, Carlo?
Are you a Peloton guy?
I have done it a couple times. It's in my building. I have not purchased one. Just because they're back ordered like crazy. One, they're super expensive. They're like over $2,000 for these bikes. Yeah. And two, the time that you wanted them, which was during the pandemic, there was like a 3-month wait list to get these bikes. And so by then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to walk outside listening to Beyonce.
I've done it a couple times because they had them in my gym before that closed. I don't know. It hurts my butt.
Yes, hurts my butt too.
That's all I'll say.
Yes.
Hurts my butt. But I will say, I wish I had invested in this company a year ago. The stock is up 250% in 2020 for that exact reason that you just said.
By the way, when Apple starts to get into the health sphere with Apple Health Plus, I think, which is coming out in December, there's a lot. We saw Peloton stock really impacted by that because Peloton relies so much on your data. But if Apple's basically going to be the one that holds all that data, that really impacts Peloton down the road.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's leave it there, Baker. I'm sorry if I was being a little.
No, I like that. Maybe I changed your mood. Maybe I changed your mood. No.
You did. I feel great. I'm in a great mood. It is Veterans Day, folks. So if you are a veteran or if you have one in your family, obviously, thank you very much for your service. You are what makes this country great and worth living in. And that is all you need to know for Wednesday, November 11th. See you guys tomorrow.